We're going to go through the relatively easy process of doing a sales return. So let's talk about the reasons why a person would do a sales return, because there's kind of two different elements to returns. Both actually happen in the finances menu. But you have this in the accounts receivable section, sales return. That's going to return inventory. So you've shipped something out, you've invoiced it, and you've posted the invoice. And you want to do a return. So if you do processing through a sales return function, that's going to bring the inventory back in and also create a credit memo for the customer. That's if you actually want to bring the inventory back. The other option is just to create a credit to the customer. So if you don't want to bring the inventory back, you just want to credit the customer, then that you do directly in the invoicing menu in this option, add new invoice. And this would be, you just say pick the customer. Well, let's just do this. So let's say we want to pick a customer, add invoice, and then it brings you into the screen where you're managing the details of an invoice. So what you're going to do is just create a miscellaneous charge, and you put a negative in front of it. So let's say if there's a price adjustment, for example, and you want to give them a credit of $100, then you just put whatever you want in the description here, discount due to damage product, something like that. And notice for each one of the miscellaneous charge types, you can set, and this is in the miscellaneous charge setup, you can choose whether or not miscellaneous charges of that type apply to ventures or not, whether they sort of you want them to be calculated into your gross profit or not. So in this case, we said yes, it does. So I'm just going to go in and pick a specific venture that this is related to. And I'll choose from my list of ventures, pick something recent, this one. And we're going to apply all $100 of it to that venture. So we said it's $100. And this is a little complicated, but if there was multiple ventures listed here, you can choose how you want to distribute that charge across those ventures. So let's say you do it by quantity, click recalculate, takes the $100 and applies all of it to that one venture. Pretty simple. And then you can create a credit memo, which you would send to the customer, and that gives them a credit back. Now, the key to this type of transaction is that this has no impact on inventory. You're just crediting the customer. If you do want to credit, if you do want to actually bring the inventory back in, then that's going to be done through the finances menu and sales returns. So let's go through that. A few different ways in which you can filter specifically what you want to return. You could do it by customer, by product, by a particular warehouse. Most people actually just choose the specific release that they want to return. This brings up a listing of all the releases which have already been shipped out, and we'll just pick one. Let's say this one for tuna. So that's the original sales order number. If you include this, that's the full release number. The customer, the product. This is the total quantity that we shipped out. We shipped out 500 pounds, and this is what we've previously returned. We've never received anything back, and this is what's available to return. And this is the warehouse that it's going to be coming back into. So note that it will always be coming back into the warehouse that you shipped it out of. If you wanted to transfer it from there, you can. That's perfectly fine. So let's say we want to do a return for today's date, which is 5/15/18. You can choose a reason for the return. You can set up different reasons for returns as reporting around that. And then you can choose whether or not you're returning the full amount or a portion. In this case, I'm going to say I'm only returning a portion, and specifically what portion you're returning you define in the next screen, which I'll show you. Now you have the choice. Remember I said when the return is done, it also creates a credit for the customer. So you have the option to create a new credit memo, or you can add this credit to an existing invoice. So if you're processing more than one credit together, but you want to send them all like on the same credit memo, then you would say add to an existing invoice, and you choose the other credit memo that was already created and add it to that. This is an interesting one, and probably the most important thing here. Make goods available to reship under the same sales order. And there's this little icon here where if you hover over it, tells you a little bit more about what that means. What it really means is if you're going to be shipping this back out, like let's say that you just did this because there was a problem with a price, so you already posted it. So once an invoice is posted, you can't make adjustments to it. So this is sort of an alternative to that. It allows you to do a return and then invoice it right back out, just under a new price. So if you check that off, it's going to create an additional shipment on the same sales order for the amount that you're returning. So in this case, this is originally sales order number 1036, first line item, first shipment. If I check that off, it's going to create 1036, first line item, second shipment for that same order. And then we have the ability to just put comments or notes in here as to why we're making this adjustment, why we're doing this sales return. Let's just say quality issue. And there's tracking around that, so you can always go back and reference that later if you want to. So I'll click proceed. Now, in this case, and this is configurable, but in this version of Visco, we're tracking specific lots. So in this case, we can choose which lots we're actually returning. So if I click that, then it's going to show us all the available lots, one row per lot. Now in this case, there only is one lot, so that's fine. And then the number of actual cartons within that lot. So in this case, it was 100 pounds, 5 cartons, so 20 pounds each. So I'm choosing how many of those cartons we actually want to return. Let's say 2 of them, and I'll click that return. And now it's going to leave the balance of that lot out. So in other words, the customer still has the balance. I'm just taking the 2 cartons back, and it shows me here status of shipment returned. So click that refresh data, brings you back into this screen. You could unreturn here or return. I'm just going to click done, and it's just a confirmation screen telling me I'm returning packages. That's fine. And now you'll notice that it's going to create a credit memo, which we'll take a look at, and it's going to create a second shipment on that sales order for the portion that we returned. So this text is essentially just explaining what just happened. Create a new credit invoice, number 394, and return was processed on that sales order and created a new sales order shipment, 103612. So we go into finances, invoicing, and we want to look at that invoice. Do it by date. This is the return that was just created. We'll click View Document. That generates the credit memo that we're actually going to be sending to the customer, so you can email right from here, and that sends the credit. If you wanted to look at the inventory, that inventory that's the venture number, 55026. So if you wanted to say, look at the inventory, we'll search inventory for, let's go by warehouse. That was Ileana. I'll say, show me any inventory that's currently in Ileana. Returns a list, and that was 55026. I'm just going to do this in reverse. 5502611. And if we click into the packing list, it's going to give us some history here. So lot details shows us kind of a history. This is now the inventory that's back. There's 2 cartons for 100 pounds each in Ileana. It's not allocated. It's available to sell. Finally, if we look at the Release Explorer for that specific sales order, so I'm going to go into Logistics, Release Explorer, and that sales order was 1036. I'll say show me any of the statuses on any of the releases for that particular order. Notice there's two different shipments here. The first one, which we shipped out, which was for the full amount, and then there's this new one that got created when we did that return. So if we wanted to ship that back out, that's very simple. We would just allocate that release again and then create a new invoice and ship it back out. But we could make changes at the sales order level first if we wanted to, using the sales order change function, if we want to say change price, for example.